From shamans to scientists, mediums to masterminds, cannabis to LSD. Spark joy, spark curiosity, and spark a joint. Because you're listening to Budding Mind. Budding Mind. Hello. Aloha, friends, and welcome to the Budding Mind podcast. Today's guest is Jesce Horton, who is the CEO and founder of the award-winning cannabis company Loud. With a background in engineering and energy management, Jesse's cannabis journey is reflective of his passion for culture, justice, and environmentalism. We love to hear it. He appears in the Netflix documentary Grass is Greener. He was appointed by Oregon Governor Kate Brown to the Task Force for Cannabis Environmental Best Practice, helping to design energy efficiency solutions and standards for the global cannabis industry. And he co-founded the nonprofit NuProject to help cannabis hopefuls enter the biz. I cannot wait to learn more about the magnificence this man is bringing to the space. So thank you, Jesce, for being here on the pod.
Wow, that was a great intro. Thank you so much. It's my pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course. I do like to read the intro to the people because who doesn't love a compliment corner?
The new intro, I thought you were going to read a basic bio, but I think you guys edited that a little bit. I might have to borrow some of that.
Yeah, you got it. This can go right in your EPK. So, Jesce, you were born in North Carolina, right? Is that correct?
No, I was actually born. My whole family, most of my family is from North Carolina, my mom and my dad's family. But I was actually born in Virginia.
Ah, okay. Where at? I lived in Richmond for a minute.
Oh, really? I was born in Charlottesville. I lived in Richmond. I lived in Manassas. When I was born, it was after my dad had gotten out of prison and he joined with a company as a janitor and ended as a general manager. So every single time he could get another position, he would take it. We would move. I never lived in a city longer than 2 or 3 years.
Wow. I kind of had a similar experience moving around. My friends would always ask me if I was a military child, and I would just say, no marketing. That's what my dad did. And so your father, James, I read this story. He went to jail for cannabis.
That's right. That's right. Cannabis distribution was his charge.
Yeah, that is so insane. And that kind of changed his trajectory of life. And so I know that that must play very much into your relationship and your path with cannabis. But let's start a little bit more towards the beginning of you. When was your first time consuming cannabis? How old were you?
Wow. My first time consuming cannabis, I think I was 15, bro. It was
Oh,
Yeah, it was after watching the movie Friday. And I was
that
like, that's pretty
trajectory
cool.
sounds appropriate.
Right.
And was this something that, like, did you feel was accepted by your family given that your father had had this negative experience with law enforcement or?
No, absolutely not. I knew that my dad and my mom smoked because when I started smoking, I recognized that smell, right? So I knew I would walk in their room and I would smell something. And I'm like, I know they smoke, but when my parents found out I smoked, they tried their hardest to get me to stop. My dad would drug test me after high school when I got home from school, on random occasions to make sure I wasn't smoking. So yeah, they were very, very strict because they didn't want to see me, I guess, go on the same trajectory as my dad. I didn't know that at the time, but that's why they were really hard on me.
Oh, wow. Oh, I feel like that little puzzle piece might have might have made more sense to you, but in the grand scheme of things, thankfully, that's not, you weren't afraid of this plant. You weren't made to feel like there was something wrong with it. You had an intuitive sense that, like, I enjoy how this makes me feel and I am going to continue onward with her. So when you were consuming cannabis as the young baby Jesce, or like teen Jesce, uh, did you ever foresee a future where you would actually be working in an industry? Did you foresee an industry even existing?
No way. I mean, no way. I mean, I just remember, conversations when you're smoking with your friends, right? And everyone's like, man, they're never going to legalize this. They're never going to legalize it, right? As we're kind of, looking for cops driving in our car and everything, making sure we don't get caught. So at no point did I think, not alone, I would not be working in the industry, but I never thought that, like you said, there would be an industry. I never thought it would ever happen.
And when did you first enter the space? Did you have experience prior to creating Loud?
No, I was actually, I went to school, got my regular corporate job as an engineer, spent about 7 years at that company, went out to Germany. I was in Munich, Germany for about a year and a half, working at the headquarters, and just happened to move back to the US and select Portland, Oregon as my next job. So I was actually here with my company and then just started growing in my basement. And, even for that year, I never thought it was possible. I was just, really excited, about the opportunity to grow. And cannabis was legal for the first time in my life, coming from the South, then Germany and coming up to Portland. So I was just really enthralled in just the love of it, and learning about it, and the opportunity to grow different strains and smoke different strains was just, I mean, I was just over the moon. So, even then, I never thought I would join the industry until maybe about a year and a half after I got here.
Wow, so interesting. And so you said you were cultivating cannabis. I had read that you were actually, I would love to hear more about the story because I didn't get too many details, but that you were really impassioned by medical cannabis because you had seen the cannabis that you had grown help people who were experiencing chronic pain and suffering from cancer and other disease. Can you tell me about that origin for you?
Yeah, that was really crazy, Brooke, because, my whole life, cannabis was, in my idea, recreational, right? We just wanted to get high. We love getting high, but that's what it was to me. And when we heard about this whole medical cannabis happening on the West Coast back then, we just thought it was kind of fake, right? People just trying to get cannabis, and it was just a way to open up for HIV patients, right? To have some good quality of life, after getting the disease. So I never made that connection. And then after coming to Portland, in order to grow, you had to have a medical card, right? So I went in there and I did my fake limp into the medical card center, and I'm just
Oh,
like,
my
oh,
shoulder.
oh, yeah, I really need that card. So he gave me the card. I ran out, and ran to the first dispensary. And when I learned that in order to grow, you had to grow for yourself, but you could also have patients that allowed you to grow more plants. And I had my 4 plants or 6 plants in my garage, but I wanted to grow more plants. So I just reached out to, a fraternity brother of mine. He was elderly. He and his wife were interested in cannabis. And, he was telling me about some of the things she was experiencing. She had cancer. He was having issues with insomnia. And I just gave him some bud and like, hey, yeah, sure, go ahead, right? This is my chance to grow more cannabis. And as I was listening to them tell me about how they were, their quality of life was improving. And as I was going to dispensaries and I'm talking to people who have moved from states like Texas and Arkansas so that they can get medical cannabis, I thought I really was like, man, maybe there is something to this whole medical thing. So I kind of
Mm,
started learning more about that. And that's where it really clicked to me, that cannabis had a real place in society, that it
mhm.
wasn't just for people getting high, but that it was so much bigger. And that's when I really was just starting to realize the viability of the industry and where things could possibly go.
Right on. Oh, I love that. So you were really just, it was, sounds like kind of trial and error at first that, I mean, it makes sense with a background in engineering. I feel like the way engineers' brains works is like, how do I figure this problem out? But applying that to like horticulture, to
Yeah.
being a grower, were you the novice? Like, how did you figure out that process? What was your cannabis like when you were first growing it?
You know what? I'm not gonna lie. Like, I'm not gonna front. It was actually good. My first plant was really good. And, I learned, back then in the medical days, everyone was sharing information. Even when you look at like online blogs, you would go in and, hey, diagnose this plant issue, or you would send a picture on the blog of your plant and people would be firing in there with all kind of stuff, telling you about what they thought it was. And 90% of the time it was bullshit, but it gave you a lot of information and a lot of perspectives. And then, as I'm going to the grow shops, I'm talking to the guys who, are working in the grow shop, and most of them grew at some level. So I'm just in there talking to them about this, about that, how to set up my facility or how to set up my garage. And it helped me to understand that cannabis cultivation to me is really two things. Without a doubt, the engineering mind and how do I figure this out? How do I do it better? How do I think outside of the box helps. But, it's also discipline, right? I'm going to really, I care about this. I really want to focus. I want to be as good as I can. And I love cannabis. So that was there. I wanted to be really disciplined. And then the third, is genetics, honestly. It's really about what you're growing. And, Oregon has some of the best genetics. There was genetics being shared everywhere at that time. So I had access to really a great lineup of cannabis, and I was able to use that discipline and use that problem solving mentality to come up with some really good crops my first, second, third time, and that's what made me think, wow, I really thought I was just amazing. I had a green thumb, but those things, I was like, man, I'm a great grower, and it wasn't really that. It was
Well, it
just
was
those.
that and some other things. So, oh, beautiful. You talk about discipline, and I think that's a really interesting component that is part of the wheel of necessity to drive something forward, and something that a lot of people kind of lack. But why? I think like when you're able to have discipline, it means that you're probably working with the right thing. But was there ever, um, I guess, a struggle for you, or like a moment of, what am I doing? Or did you feel like things just kept unfolding in the way that they were meant to?
No, there was a lot of what am I doing moments, and also things kept unfolding. I'll tell you the first what am I doing moment. I decided to quit my job 1 year after getting here, and
Hell
it
yeah.
was right, yeah, fuck corporate. So it wasn't really so much about the love or the industry or the idea of the industry. It was really because I was getting so horrible at my job. Instead of going on sales meetings, right, and I should be making sales calls, I'm sitting in my grow room like diagnosing cow mag issues, right? And I'm like, damn, they're gonna fire me, and I can't get fired, right? So I'm like, okay, let me just quit. I was gonna think about maybe going with Nike or trying to find another corporate job, and then I just decided, I'm gonna go with cannabis. So I quit my job. For some reason, I thought I was gonna be able to start a dispensary with $10,000, right? And, like really, I thought, back then it was closer to possible, but I had 10,000. I'm like, yeah, I can buy a pound of weed for 2,000. I can buy, I can get rent for the first month at this place for 2,000. And I was wrong. I went and talked to a consultant. He laughs in my face. He's like, if you don't have 100,000, then you got no chance.
Wow.
And I'm like,
Even
I'm
what year
walking
was
out of that.
this?
This was 2013,
Wow.
2013, maybe early 2014. And I'm walking out of that meeting like, what the hell did I do? I quit my job and I got nowhere to go. So there was a lot of those moments. And, the universe continued to make way for me as I move forward.
And so, how did this parlay into the birth of Loud?
So after I walked out of that meeting, I realized that I wasn't going to be able to do it with 10,000. I reached out to my dad, believe it or not, and I said, "Hey man, I need you to loan me some money to try to get this going." And not only did he make my first investment, but he also reached out to many of his friends that he had met in corporate over these years, and they were really the ones that put that money up to help us to actually help me to get out of my basement. We weren't able to find a retail dispensary for some reason. I thought, everyone thinks you got to have a dispensary, right?
Hmm.
That's the way in for a long time. So I really wasn't even thinking about growing. I was looking for a dispensary, weren't able to find that. Ended up finding, a small warehouse out in the mountains, and was able to buy the equipment and get going. My first venture, which was not loud, but Panacea Valley Gardens was my medical grow back then.
I love the name. That's so adorable.
Yeah.
And so then eventually this experience and just your history of growing and forming a loving relationship with the plant and wanting the best for her um, continued to cultivate this passion within you for craft cannabis, which is that's like the whole meat behind Loud is like the quality of cannabis and it coming from meaningful sources. So how did your experience lend to how you wanted to create this company?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, when I got to Portland, I told you I mentioned I moved around my whole life. I never lived in a city other than my college city for longer than 2 or 3 years. So I got here, and within the first 6 months, I was just captivated. I was captivated by this lifestyle in the Pacific Northwest. I was captivated by the nature. Seeing Mount Hood reminded me of, when I was in Germany and seeing the Alps, and those were the first mountains I had ever really seen. And I'm a mountain person, not an ocean person. Some people are ocean people, right? I'm
I
a mountain.
understand.
What
I'm a
about
forest girl.
forest? Okay, I
Yeah.
never heard
Yeah,
forest.
I want to
I
sit on
like
a rock and just let the sunbeams penetrate me like a little fairy.
Okay. Okay. So there's a third category then. There's a third category. So I'm not either of those. I'm a mountain guy. So when I saw Mount Hood on my sales route, I'm like, wow, it's just something that does something to me. And as I started learning about this culture in the Pacific Northwest and in Portland and how that combined with cannabis culture, um, I just got deeper and deeper into this, which I think is special in so many different ways of these things combining with nature and the city and cannabis and quality of life, right? So I just started getting deeper and deeper with that, learning more about the cannabis industry, talking to more people, more growers. And, I just had found my home. I found, what I was meant to do, which is, not only grow cannabis, not only be in this cannabis industry, but add value to the market by helping to represent, that culture, by helping to bring, some of the best cannabis to the market, and by also contributing right to the different aspects in cannabis that align with community and uplifting communities as the industry grows. So all of those things, I think, embody what loud is, right, and what loud represents and is bringing to the market, and that's really what it's about. It's these things that have come to make up who I am, and I'm kind of bringing it out there to the market through our cannabis company.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. A lot of, and we'll dive into more of the work that you've done in the world, but you are an activist. And I don't know if you call yourself that, but like everything I'm reading about you, I'm like, oh my gosh, this guy is like, there's so many cannabis brands that just kind of exist and float, and you don't even know the face behind them or the mission statement. It's a brand like anything else. But your path and your career through cannabis has always been saturated with meaning and trying to like direct the industry in a certain way. So why is this important to you? Why don't you just want to be like, I'm going to just sit back here and just sell my weed and whatever? What is that driving force?
You know what? It's an obligation.
Hmm.
It really is. I think most of the people that love this industry, I've heard people say, I was gifted this industry. I was gifted this opportunity to get into cannabis. And that's how I feel, right? I'm not religious, but when I was in Germany, I literally prayed. I'm like, if I can be so successful in something that I absolutely hate, please, let me find something that I love and just watch what I can do. I literally said that when I was in Germany, and every night. So when I was lucky enough to come back to come to Portland, it just landed in my lap. It was gifted to me, and I don't call myself an activist. I do just want to grow great cannabis and create dope products and dope brands, and build really cool teams and add value to the market. That's really what I want to do. But my activism is an obligation. There's so many areas that I see where I can help with the illegality of cannabis and affecting my family and my dad. Myself being arrested. Me seeing a lot of friends being arrested. and then also seeing a lot of opportunity in the market, and not just trying to do good, right, by trying to help people to get in, by truly recognizing that this market will be better, we will make more money, we will have better products and better brands if we truly make sure that the people who really consume cannabis and represent cannabis culture have the ability to benefit from all these different ways in the industry. So it really all comes out of just me trying to just put my all into being a businessman in this market. But of course, the obligation is attached to me on a lot of things that I do to try to do good in the industry as well. But it's still connected back to just trying to make a better industry, and doper product.
Right on. Yeah. And one of the ways that you're trying to make a better industry is using the background that you have, trying to inform people and create a more sustainable industry by like at least acknowledging that there's room to grow, as there is for any industry, for best practices for growing and for distribution and whatever. But you quite literally were on like you worked with the governor. You worked with the governor of Oregon to create environmental best practices for cannabis. And I don't think a lot of people outside of the cannabis space know the environmental impact of our industry. I believe it's like 1% of greenhouse gas emissions come from the cannabis industry. I think and it's like, that doesn't sound like a lot, but that's like a lot, like a whole percent. And there's so many other ways that the laws kind of inhibit the cannabis industry from progressing from an environmental standpoint. But what is the work that you've done in this space and that you want to see happen? Like, what is the dream that we could get the whole industry on board to help support our planet in a more meaningful way? Because that's kind of our duty too. There's a responsibility there. Yeah.
Yeah, isn't there some real irony, right? That growing a plant for the health of people, right, hurts the planet, I
Yeah.
think, in many ways. So
That's a big, grandiose joke.
yeah, right, exactly. So I think that's something that's facing our industry that we're inevitably going to have to address, right, in many different ways, whether we put it off now or we face it in a much harsher way in the future. We've got to move towards more sustainable practices. We've got to move towards more energy efficiency, water conservation, all of those things. And it's not very difficult, right, to make big strides. When I was at Siemens, that engineering company, we had an energy and environmental business unit that was just environmental services business unit that was just starting almost right after I was getting out of college. And I had the opportunity to work in starting up that business unit, travel to different industrial facilities across the country, and just identify ways for them to reduce their energy or their carbon footprint. So I saw there that there's a lot of low hanging fruit, really small things that are available to make really big impacts in that overall picture for all these different companies. And then thus all these manufacturing and other verticals around the country and around the world. So when I got into cannabis, it was also another one of those obligations that was kind of attached to me because I knew I had a way, or I knew I had a good perspective, just like with criminal justice and cannabis prohibition enforcement. I had a lot of connections there that helped me to easily identify, right, or have a perspective that furthered the discussion. Because of my history with that energy and environmental business service unit, I had a real perspective in coming into cannabis and all the low hanging fruit. When I was in my garage, I actually had water cooled lights. So there's like heat exchangers where you bring in water chiller and you cycle water, cold water, and you blow a fan over the lights. And instead of having an air conditioner, what came out was cooled air. And then you're also cooling the lights right at the cause. So those types of things really intrigued me because I hated it whenever I was in engineering, right? And I was at a Coke chicken factory, Brooke, and they told me, Jesse, look at all these chicken heads being cut off, right? You need to tell us, stay here for a week and tell us how do we cut off more chicken heads with less energy, right? And that's my project in engineering. So I'm sitting there looking every day and just seeing chicken heads being cut off and trying to do calculations on how to do it a little more efficient. So whenever I got into cannabis, right, and I'm like, okay, how do I grow weed more efficiently? Oh, my mind was going and I was enjoying it. So at the time, cannabis was being more regulated in Oregon. I knew the governor had this task force, and I was also learning about this organization called Resource Innovation Institute that I've worked with for 6 years, among its inception. And it's all about just identifying this low-hanging fruit, these small opportunities to make facilities more efficient. And a lot of times it helps with quality as well. So my goal at that point was really just to talk about these different technologies. I went on the road to different, my first MJ Biz or my second, and did a presentation on, using programmable logic controllers in grow rooms to reduce energy. And it just became just a really cool thing and a cool way of sharing knowledge, sharing information that I already had, but also nerding out on things that I love to do. And it was just, as you know, there's so many different areas where we can improve. First is energy usage, and that's kind of the main thing that people are looking at. But often the industry is compared to like houses or cars, and I think the industry needs to be compared to other really industries that benefit our society, that create
Mm.
jobs, that create taxes. And when you look at it in comparison to those industries, there's still a lot that can be done. There's still a lot that can be done better, but I think the industry gets a bad rap in a lot of ways. So I think it's about sharing that knowledge, about having a good perspective on how we view the growth of the industry, but also working with the best people from across the country, sharing information, sharing best practices, and also Resource Innovation Institute has the largest data set for controlled indoor agriculture. So that's really where we get down to improvement, is having the right data, sharing best practices, and actually being able to implement it. And the last thing is that there's not a lot of funding right now. So,
Hmm.
a lot of cultivation facilities would love to, replace all of their $200 HID or, lights, right? $200 lights, HPS lights for $2,500 LEDs. But, that's not always feasible. So, the financing and the funding to invest in these projects is extremely important as well.
Wow, I appreciate that perspective so much. You turned me on my own head there, just thinking about, yes, of course there's room for improvement, but do not let those things outweigh the overall benefits of the industry as a whole that it has on both consumers and non-consumers by way of taxes. Do you think that these innovations or efficiency implementations are made easier when it comes to craft cannabis? Or like, what's your perspective on the large scale, massive grows out there? And I don't know, like, is there difficulty in that space?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, in all aspects of cultivation, every kind of key performance indicator, quality, efficiency, um, those types of things, energy usage, of course, the bigger they get, right, you lose a lot. You lose a lot with these massive grows in all of those areas. So I'm always a proponent of smaller facilities, more efficient facilities, facilities that are utilizing um, environmental practices like no-till cultivation, like practices regenerative, agriculture practices that really restore back into the land, right, and back into the whole process. So I do think that smaller grows are better for a lot of reasons, because it's just harder to capture those efficiencies in many ways. When you go bigger, right, you lose a lot of different things.
Right on. And when you're curating your array of cannabis strains and your offerings through Loud, what are you looking for? What are you looking for in flower, and how do you want it to make your consumers feel?
Now, this is the stuff I love talking about here. I
Eee.
love other stuff, but yeah, curating. That's exactly what we do. So we hunt a lot of strains, we breed a lot of strains, we, kind of started doing that. And we're always trying to find those strains that really check the box. And, the boxes for us really, of course, are, the effect being the first, first and foremost. You can have all the great things, the aesthetic qualities, blah, blah, blah. And when you smoke it, we call it air pack, right? It's like, I feel like I just smoked some air. You know what I mean? It's like I'm not really high, I don't really feel anything. That's the air pack.
Uh-huh.
Air pack, no matter how great it is, it's gotta go. So effect is really important. How does it make you feel? Of course, aesthetics, it's gotta, have the look, it's gotta have the trichome coverage. Everything with color is really what moves nowadays. The smell, without a doubt, that's really how cannabis connects to you. It has to be loud. That's
Uh-huh.
another kind of that we chose our name. So the smell and the bud density, the bud structure are all things that really matter. But what it really comes down to, because it's very hard to find one that checks all those boxes. But then I think there's one other thing that we add in curating this menu of trying to find things that are representative of these different flavor categories, right, in the market, right? There's different defining flavor categories that really make up what connoisseur consumers really love, right? You've got your GMOs, garlic cookies, right? That really has that funk that kind of, has become big. You've got your citrus, right? That people really love. And a lot of times for the sativa effects, you've got you've got your OGs, you've got your gas, your kind of candy gas that's really kind of taken over the gelatos and those types of things. So the apricots, we try to select our strains and what we put out there to hit these different categories to be kind of what we connect with and our representation in that category. So that's kind of the extra level that we enjoy figuring out as we curate our menu.
Mm-hmm. Honestly, I'm like salivating at all the different categories. I can smell them. I can smell them over here. And so your business is in Portland. What is I've never actually been to Portland. So first of all, I know, forgive me, Father, for I have sinned. I will get there and
It's
enjoy.
cool to not been to Portland, man. You got to come to Portland.
I will get there. I certainly will. But for an outsider, what makes the cannabis community and the consumer base in Portland unique from what you've seen? Because you've moved around so much. So what's the vibe
Yeah,
over there?
what makes it really unique is that it's a very highly discerning group of consumers
Hmm.
that are really no frills. They don't care about, we focus a lot on branding just because that's who we are.
Mm-hmm.
But our branding probably doesn't go as far here to influence people as it may go in other areas, right? Because people just want the product. They want it for a good price. They want something that's quality. They want something that no one else has. They want something that they can pull out at a party, right? And just kind of show someone, and everyone's like, "Oh, what's that? We want to smoke." That does something to really craft connoisseur consumers. So I would say without a doubt, Portland is the most highly discerning and the least influenced as it relates to branding and those types of things that affect a lot more communities than Portland.
Right. Yeah. In Los Angeles, I'm like, oh, yeah, we definitely want the pretty packaging. I want it in the reusable glass. I want it to be covered in flowers and look like it's a bottle of perfume. Not me personally, but I definitely see that in the space. And it definitely holds a place, of course. But I think that's when you do sometimes start to get into the brands where who's behind this? There's that disconnect of like, just look at the pretty exterior. Don't question anything else. Don't even worry about it.
Right.
What makes you proud to be in Portland? Because you could have landed anywhere after you moved from Germany, but you said you moved to Oregon and now you've established yourself there. But like, why? Why Portland? Why for you?
Yeah, I think there's a number of reasons why I love Portland. I mentioned like just that close proximity of nature and city. I'm not a too big of a city guy, but I got to be, 10 minutes from downtown, right? Or less. So I get that, but at the same time, I'm 20 minutes from a beautiful waterfall or great scenery or just kind of a low key setup. So I love that about Portland. I love the intentions of Portland. I think a
Very
lot of things
progressive
are,
city.
yeah, right. And
Yeah.
that's why I say the intentions. Like in my neighborhood, I'm probably the only, black person in the neighborhood, but there's probably like 15 Black Lives Matter signs. And some people don't like that. They're like, oh, they don't really care. But I'm like, I'm from the South, dude. Like, you don't understand what that means. People will never
Mhm.
put that shit up. Like, nobody even will even do it for a performative, reason. So the fact that there's that openness, there's that willing to move in the right directions, um, combined with the cannabis community, combined with the focus on quality of life and not so much with keeping up with the Joneses, right?
Mhm.
And what everyone else has. It's really about quality of life and being yourself. So those are the things that I really love about Portland. And I also think, Brooke, like in the Black community, um, there's this openness to stepping outside of the box right now, right? You see it where in these areas where like, he's not the perfect example, but Ye or Kanye, right? He was living out in Wyoming. And, Travis Scott, he was like, he put on Twitter his favorite place or where he goes for happiness is Portland. So like there's this openness to the Black community for places like this. And I just love what that represents. And I hope that I can be a bridge to, for that community to kind of this lifestyle and this way of living. So I think that's also a purpose type of piece in what I'm doing as well. It makes me love this city.
Oh, and one way that you're doing that, at least within the cannabis space, is through the creation of the Minority Cannabis Business Association, which is to bridge the gap between people impacted by the war on drugs and Black and brown communities and bring them into the cannabis space and give them some wind beneath their wings so that they can, experience a career in an industry that has wronged them historically. So what was the impetus for creating this organization, and what's the mission there?
Yeah, so it was when I first got into the industry, I benefited so much from like these corporate programs and these networking things, right, that helped me to get to a high place in industry, right, in the corporate world. So when I got into cannabis, I just knew that there was nothing like that, right? The ability to network with other like-minded people who had these same goals, it just really wasn't there. So, you know, um, I decided to join with a few people. We, developed this organization called Minority Cannabis Business Association. The goal was, economic empowerment. The goal was criminal justice, and the goal was medical awareness, and that there's a lot of diseases that affect Black and brown people at higher rates that cannabis helps with greatly, like diabetes, heart
Mm.
disease, different types of cancer, right? So spreading that message, there was a lot there. So we ended up bringing on, really a who's who of people across the industry, from Wanda James, first Black dispensary owner in Colorado, Al Harrington of Viola, Dr. Shonda Macias, Dr. Rachel Knox, a lot of people around the country kind of joining that effort to bring that organization together to kind of spread those principles. And when I left that organization in 17 to really focus more on business, a lot of things were happening then. I left to start the business, but then I also started another nonprofit that now has crossed over the $2 million mark in
Wow.
grants and 0% interest loans given to Black and brown businesses in the cannabis industry through partnerships with the city of Portland. We get a portion of the city's cannabis tax.
Wow.
Partnerships with Ben from Ben and Jerry's. He is one of the biggest funders of the organization, and the other big and small companies, Cookies, local companies like Wild, have all chipped in to kind of help to push this effort forward. And this one, the NuProject, is really just focused mostly on, the business efforts and helping people to create intergenerational wealth.
And how does one, if they want to work with the NuProject, what does that look like for, like, someone has to kind of have a business plan together or already has to be like knee deep in the project and is looking for other resources? What is someone
All
coming to you?
Yeah, all different areas, Brooke. Definitely people who have the idea, who want to go after a license or who want to go after, an ancillary business. We, help in different ways with them. Also, of course, people who are license holders who already have revenue, who need kind of the ability to invest in projects, like I mentioned, to, get some LED lights, right?
Mhm.
Those types of projects where they aren't really able to invest in it themselves, but having 30, 40, $50,000 from NuProject can help to push them over the hump to get in towards scalability. So it's kind of, it runs the gamut of people who are kind of just starting out and people who are already successful and want to invest in, different projects to help to get them to the next level.
Ah, oh, that's so incredible. Also, side note about the Ben and Jerry's thing. I used to work at Ben and Jerry's in high school. Thank you.
What?
I know I would get high in the bathroom. It was so fabulous, and then eat them out of their ice cream. Oh yeah. Oh my God. It was a gluttonous time in my life. But that aside, um,
That's
do you feel like, I mean, because you said that a portion of NuProject's funding actually comes from the city of Portland's taxes, cannabis taxes. Do you feel like the city is easy to work with in this way? Like the city really supports the cannabis industry, or what are both sides of the coin there?
there's always places to do better, without a doubt. So, if anyone from the city is watching this, I'm not giving you an A plus, but without a doubt, I think the city of Portland has been a great partner, I think, in this fight. Dashida Dawkins, who ran the program in the city of Portland, has now taken over the position in New York City. So she now is running the cannabis program in New York City, and is carrying over a lot of the things that she was able to implement here. So without a doubt, the city of Portland has been an excellent place to operate, to do some new and unique things, and a partner in this effort to make the industry a little more equitable and diverse. And I think just like the city of Portland, there's places that are also doing great work, but need some assistance and need to kind of do a little bit better, right? And need to make their programs a little more effective. So,
Mhm.
I'm proud of what's happening in a lot of places across the country, especially Portland. There's a long way to go.
I think that ties into what you were speaking about earlier, your involvement in the cannabis industry, the responsibility as someone who is knowledgeable about so many aspects of the plant and the industry itself to continue to be part of the conversations that are crafting what is to come. Oh, did you hear that little ding? So, one thing that I wanted to hear a little bit more about, which you mentioned earlier, is that you had actually um, experienced, you had been arrested for cannabis possession multiple times. First of all, what the fuck? I had read that each time it was less than 2 grams, which is, you know, probably racist. That's probably what it really comes down to. But why did you keep coming back to cannabis? Was there any point where you were like, okay, I'm scared of this?
Yeah, yeah. There were definitely points where I questioned, what I was doing, right? This thing that I think I love is causing a lot of pain and turmoil in my life, right? Being arrested, having to drop out of college because I lost a scholarship, the disappointment from my parents having to come pick me up out of jail, after going through all those things in high school and knowing my dad's background, disappointment from family, right? And thinking that I was kind of going in the wrong direction, with thinking that I ruined my life in a lot of ways. I even got a hair test when I was supposed to join General Electric, right? Which, from an engineering perspective, was like the epitome, right? Like Coca-Cola if you're marketing or something like that. So I got an offer to join their program, their leadership program, after doing 3 semesters, doing 3 internships with them. And I got selected for the one location that did a hair test. Right, I had stopped smoking for 2 months, knowing that I can pass a urine test, and that was the expectation. And then they say,
Oh.
actually, Jesse, we're gonna send you over here to this location, and this one does actually hair tests. So I failed that, right, and then got the offer rescinded, and I'm like, man, I'm really effing my whole life up by dealing with, by being involved with cannabis. And I think what made me go back, Brooke, was I think now I know it's the endocannabinoid system, right? I think it balances me out, right? It helps me to get to where I need to be as focused. I think maybe when I was in school, or maybe even still now, I have some level of ADHD, and that I don't have the easiest ability to like just focus on something, right? I'm always here, I'm there, I'm there, I'm always over here. You see my whiteboard. There's like, it looks like hieroglyphics, because not this one, but I got another one over here with all these different ideas. And I was a horrible math student. I was like a D math student when I was young. And it wasn't until I started smoking cannabis that I became an A math student, right? And I then, go on to do engineering. And that I understood that there was something there that just helped me to get to where I needed to be, right? So
Mm.
it was really that. It was really, I think, the balancing of my endocannabinoid system and cannabis fitting it like a puzzle piece, and me understanding how good that made me feel and how right that made me feel, that helped me to just keep kind of pushing through all of that turmoil. And I'm really glad that I did, right, because I found what I was meant to be doing.
Right on. Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of people who work professionally in the cannabis space, at least up until a point, had faced a lot of adversity in their commitment towards working with this plant. A very interesting road for so many of us. What does cannabis mean to you? Like, what is she in your life beyond her helping you find this homeostasis in your body through like the technical endocannabinoid system? What does she
Yeah,
represent for you?
yeah, outside of that connection, and helping me in my wellness, without a doubt, cannabis means that I can contribute to my purpose, on this earth. I think, is I think we all have a purpose. And I think cannabis, or utilizing this industry, is giving me the opportunity to hopefully create, knock on wood, with intergenerational wealth for myself. The industry is tough, but I'm moving in the right direction. So it's helping me to do that and leave a legacy for my kids and my family. It's helping me to help other people. Part of that prayer, Brooke, when I said help me to find something that I really love to do, it was like so that I can reach my full potential,
Hmm.
right? And I realized at that time my full potential wasn't about just what I can do for myself. I know I'm going to be successful. I know I'll be fine, but my full potential is about what I can do for other people as well. And it's not that I'm an activist, because I'm not doing all this extra stuff and trying to be a do-gooder. This cannabis, it gives me an easy way to help other people. You know what I mean? It's like low-hanging fruit for me, and I can just pick it up and hand it to others, right? So cannabis gives me the ability to fulfill my purpose, which is, like I said, leaving a legacy and also helping other people to do the same and to find happiness and to wake up every day and not be like, man, I hate what the hell I'm doing, as opposed to waking up and saying, wow, I'm excited about this. I love it. I mean, life is so much different. It's like night and day, right? When you're looking at those two perspectives. So the more people that I can help to get there, I mean, I'll be happy, and I feel like I, reached my full potential.
Mm. I love that. And I love the prayer that you shared. I think that's something that a lot of people might need to be on their knees asking that same question to the heavens. Um, and grateful that you were able to find your way onto this path. And one of the things, if you don't call yourself an activist, that's okay, but you're a voice in the space, like you are. So much so that you are actually on the Netflix documentary, Grass is Greener. Can you tell me about that experience and how you were approached to be a part of this, and what you wanted to add to this story that was being told about cannabis?
Yeah, definitely. I can't remember who recommended me, but some producers reached out to me. They said that Fab Five Freddy was putting together a documentary. Would I be interested, in being in it? And there was a lot of stuff going on, so I actually kind of blew them off at first, and then for some reason it came up again, and I decided to have them come out. So they came out. We did a tour. Me and Fab smoked a bit and hung out, and just he just informed me kind of how my story helped to fit into this whole bigger thing that he was putting together about the criminality of cannabis and how the connection with music has helped to make it a more popular or a more accepted part of culture, even throughout some of the negativity with criminality and arrests. And now, this opportunity for the industry to now give back, or the industry to open up opportunities for people like myself, people from my community, was kind of like the full circle there. So I was excited to be included in that story. There's a lot of really dope people that are on that documentary.
Mm. And speaking to the criminality of cannabis and the social justice efforts or movements that are being made in this space, who do you look to that's doing it right? That's like helping to not be so performative, but really like who is involved in moving forward the cannabis space in a more equitable way?
Yeah, great. So my favorite person is one of my first board members with MCBA. She actually was the first board member that we brought on, Shalene Title. Shalene Title was a cannabis commissioner in Massachusetts, and I call her the lion of social equity in a lot of ways, right? She will fight hard, she will stand up, she's not afraid to call anyone out, and she's attached herself to the mission, I think, in some really important ways that are now carrying over to how these things will be happening in federal legalization with her organization, Parabola Center. I also love what Roz McCarthy is doing with Minorities for Medical Marijuana. I love Dr. Shonda Macias. I call her the GOAT in a lot of ways,
The lion and the
without a
goat.
doubt. The lion and the GOAT, right? And another GOAT without a doubt is Wanda James. She has always been a friend of mine. We worked together a lot. During MCBA, and I've always appreciated her for joining with me and helping me to get that organization to another level. And she continues to push this cause. That was someone who I looked up to when I first got into the industry. So I think there's a lot of people like that. Al Harrington is doing some great work over at Viola. A lot of people who are really helping to push things forward.
Keepers of the flame. Thank you for all of that.
Yeah.
I've got one last question for you, Jesse. Okay, you ready? This
Okay.
is the real big kicker. So as a yeah, okay, so as a little tangible takeaway for all of our listeners, having now gotten to know you, what is one thing that you can share with us, be it a book, a documentary, a country you visited, that had opened or changed your mind, and what was that?
Oh wow, one.
You can give us three.
Well, Well, I'll say Amsterdam, without a doubt, helped me to realize the potential of the cannabis industry. Back when I got out of college and I was still thinking it was not possible, I hadn't been on the West Coast and seen the things that were happening with medical back then. Being in Amsterdam helped me to understand the potential of cannabis, right? And what could happen combining that with the medical aspect. But I would say the book, Brooke, without a doubt, that led to that prayer that I mentioned to you, leads to all the things that I discussed about the universe kind of aligning for me and opening up, right? As I try to move with sincerity, with purpose, try to contribute to my purpose on the earth. A lot of that comes from the book, The Alchemist. Have you read that? You ever read The
Yes.
Alchemist?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so that whole idea of, moving towards something with sincerity and the universe aligning and opening up and pushing you in the right direction, without a doubt, changed my mind. That's what led to the prayer, say, hey, help me to find something. Praying to the universe really helped me to find something that's meant for me. And ever since I started thinking that way, my life has just opened up in so many different ways. And I just try to move with the right intentions. I try not to get stressed out about all the crazy shit that's happening, all the negative things that are happening in the industry with having a small business, just in general. And I'm able to just focus on putting one foot in front of the other and trusting that the universe will open up for me in the right directions. And it has. It continues to do that in so many different ways.
Oh, wow. That's such a great call to reread The Alchemist. And I love what you shared about sincerity. It definitely reads on, what you resonate with. So it's working. The book worked. All right, Jesse, can you tell everyone where we can find you and Loud?
Yeah, please check out Loud, www.loud.com. We're always adding new videos, commercials, products to our website so you can learn about what we're doing at The Loud, THELOWD, on Instagram. Please check us out, interact with us. And you can find me on most platforms at Jesce, Jesce Horton, Horton.
Beautiful. All that will be in the show notes, so you can have lots of new stalkers. Um, Thank you so much for your time and for sharing your beautiful story with us. And I'm looking forward to seeing you in Portland one day over a cup of coffee, smoking a spliff, looking at the mountains.
That would be amazing. That would be amazing. Thank you so much, Brooke. I'm a big fan. You're hilarious. I'll definitely be following along with everything you're doing. So
Right
thanks for
on.
having me.
Much love. Have a beautiful day, Jesse.
Cool.